What if I told you there's a micro cap stock tying itself to almost every trend? You got Bitcoin, robotics, blockchain, and even space batteries, which is their main business. And they just broke out of a downtrend ahead of their earnings tomorrow. It's KULR Technologies KULR stock. They got under 50 employees and bold claims. Is this a breakout or is it just hype here? Let's dive in. So, taking a look at KULR, we started covering it here back in November. It was just under 40 cents or 30 cents a share. And we got to trade it pretty consistently and made some good gains on it early in the year, or end of the year, up to about $5.60. Since then, it's pulled back and it's been in this very consistent downtrend. As you can see, from that $5 price point, it's now back down to $1.65, and it was swinging from $1.60 up to 270 back to $1.60, and it's got all the way down to $1. And we just recently saw it break above the 200-day moving average and shoot up above that lowering resistance level that has been so consistent. And now it's starting to indicate more bullish momentum. So there's three things when we look at a stock. And the first thing is the market. When it comes to the market, it's a little uncertain with KULR because the market mainly is space battery tech, but they've kind of changed some of their approach recently. If you go to their main site, they focus on space and aerospace and defense. And a lot of the partnerships that they have, or maybe not partnerships, but it says trusted by, is NASA, you got Molicel, Serba, you got Lockheed Martin, Department of Transportation. So these are, pretty big companies. One thing to note, as they are maybe one of the companies that's really focusing on battery tech in space. We went to that space symposium that they supposedly were supposed to be at, and that's the whole reason we went. It's a SpaceX sponsored event. We got to meet Rocket Lab. We got actually we there was other reasons we went, but they weren't there. And then shortly after, they've expanded into some other things. They got robotics, which is just kind of, I guess, a sales partnership. There's a robotics company from Germany that specializes in this, and then and it's like a exoskeleton that people wear so they can move boxes. And so the markets that they're in are, various markets, but this was a little weird. They also had some things where they branded a robot that wasn't actually there. That's not their robot, but they branded it KULR with digital graphics. And then they have this kind of weird stuff with the fireworks and the stock going crazy with the American flag. Anyway, that was like a little skeptical thing that we saw. Anyway, then they also announced that they're allocating 90% of their Bitcoin cash. So they're like a couple markets. You got Bitcoin, you got robotics, you got the space, the batteries or defense. So there's all these different markets. And then when we're looking at the stock, so just kind of take that into consideration. Markets that they're in, they're growing markets. They're good markets, but they're also kind of spread pretty thin. They even just announced blockchain as well recently in one of their announcements ahead of their earnings. They launched a blockchain verifiable supply chain. And then also in that kind of move, we go into it. But anyway, the market. It's growing markets, but a lot of different places, and they only have around 50 employees. So it's a little like, what's going on here? Okay. So we're following them originally. We followed them. They were only space company. Then we're wondering, is there real world usage? Are they actually getting usage? And so far, we've been unable to verify that their tech is being used. We've been able to see their partnerships announced on their site, but we haven't been able to fully see in person that their tech is being used. There was an announcement of a SpaceX partnership. So in the market side of things, we're like, oh, maybe they're breaking in there. But it was that they were paying SpaceX for 2025 to launch some of their batteries into space, which we haven't heard any updates on, and if that's still going through. And they were paying SpaceX, so just keep that in mind. So the market, they're in some good markets, but the real world usage also a little bit vague, I guess, to see. So they're looking okay there. Then you get into the analysis, which is the charts, the news, and the financials. And when we're looking at the charts, as we mentioned, it just broke up above the 200-day moving average. It broke out of this resistance. And so it does look more bullish. And it just kind of pulled back from $1.80 down to about $1.60. And so that part of it is looking pretty good, more bullish indication. However, one thing to note outside of, when we're looking at the chart, there is that trend, that downtrend. And then there is the breakout. But there's also this other level that we could identify, which is the support here. Here we go. So see this resistance level right there? This previous resistance. Then it was acting as a support here. Then it was acting as a support here and here. So pretty strong support level that can be clearly identified right there at $1 a share. And then you also have a resistance level here. A resistance level right here. So previous resistance level right about here. See that? And then you got support. So previous resistance acting as support, resistance, resistance. And that's actually where it is right here. It just recently, that zone, it actually, there we go, a little straighter. It just got rejected right there. So you can see the chart, on one hand, you see the overall downtrend, you see it break out, looks quite good. Like when we first looked at it, this downtrend starting to break above the 200-day moving average. But on the other hand, we're looking at it as, okay, the left to right consolidation here maybe looks a little more risky. And you take a step back to, look at the chart this way. And now the RSI, the MACD, like looking overbought. So maybe a little bit more towards the top end there, even though breaking above that, again, the green 200-day moving average, which as we mentioned, oftentimes does act as a support there. So what gives with KULR? You got the technicals looking that way a little bit maybe on the overbought side. Then you get into the financials. So KULR, they got their earnings tomorrow. So KULR earnings, you can take a look here. They got a market cap of under 500 million at 467. Financials, they're bringing in here, according to the last year, the last revenue they had was 3.3 million. So they came up 44% increase year over year. So we're looking really good there. Net income was up 11% year over year. So looking pretty good. And then you look at the quarters before and it was like, okay, maybe a little bit of volatility, but overall net income and everything else looking green. They met or beat their revenue. So now they're coming out with their earnings tomorrow. And what we're looking for is indication of that these partnerships that they announce, like they have some vague partnerships, which I can go through. They got this apparently a $6.7 million Texas Space Commission for their KULR One space battery, but they didn't mention in the article how long the partnership was, or if they were getting paid immediately or when it was starting. They just kind of said, we're awarded this $6.7 million contract as part of a $26 million grant in the Texas Space Commission. So, all right, maybe that actually is something they already received in their bank account. So that's good news. And so we're kind of moving from the financials a little bit to the news here. So financials overall, like looking pretty good, seeing increases for their market cap. I'd say it's fairly typical, looks pretty normal. Nothing to stand out negatively there. It actually looks quite positive. And then, so then you look at their financials and you move into their partnerships. And they also had a partnership they just announced recently this year where they have a partnership with a space company that was a private space company that they weren't, here it is. KULR's NASA certified M35A battery cells are selected by a leading private US space company. But they don't give the contract value or when it ends or when it starts or anything like that. They just say we were selected by this private company for which we will not name, and that's it. So now we're looking at the news. We're saying, okay, there's a few things. If those contracts, let's say, turn into a couple million, and at the same time they're seeing some increases in their revenue, what would make sense for KULR is actually maybe an earnings surprise. And look, it's at a resistance, it's getting rejected. Does it look technically on the chart, not really. It looks actually more, I would say, a little more of a hold here. Not so much bearish, but again, kind of on the resistance. It's bullish, but still at the resistance. So the technicals, let's say they hold true, they break above this $1.80 range that they touched this morning, and then revenue comes in, and that $6 million contract comes in on their financials, and it looks green. Then also Bitcoin, they allocate 90% of their cash. They got somewhere around $80 million in cash, and I believe Bitcoin has a really nice rally recently up to 103,000, and they had an average purchase price of about 98,000. So the financial side of things, it's possible. It is possible, even with spreading themselves thin and going into the robotics, and then also doing the blockchain supply chain with under 50 employees, where it's like, wow, they're doing a lot. It's possible that they still come in with some positive earnings. And I mean, if they have that $98,000 average purchase price on Bitcoin, and it's up to 103,000, and they got an average of about 60 million there. So that's 103,000 to 98,000. So 1% there would be what would that be, 900? And then or $1,000, let's call it, and it's up about $5,000 from their purchase price. So that's about a little bit less than 5% gain, or a little bit more than 5% gain. So that puts them at 5% times 60 million. So they came in at what is that? 1%, 6 million is 6 million. Or 600 million times 5 is 3 million. $3 million added to their revenue sheet. So they added $3 million to their cash reserves in this quarter just by buying Bitcoin. So essentially, they would have held cash, it would have been 60 million. But rather than holding cash, they were able to bring in $3 million in appreciation value on their money because they put it in Bitcoin. That's the outlook. So cash reserves, we could say increase the revenues if those contracts are included, could look good. And then the news recently, maybe they have some updates, and it actually they have some solid footing in some of the industries. It's getting a little shaky. It's looking a little strange in certain areas, like, we showed some of the articles, but it is possible that right now they're able to come out with some positive earnings, and maybe we'll even play a bull or a bear trade on KULR tomorrow. I'm considering possibly having a trade. If we see a big dip, maybe at market open, maybe we allocate a very small percentage. I would urge caution for anybody that's looking to invest around earnings. As we know, those are some of the most volatile times, and with a market cap of just 450 million, that means that the swings could be very high, and prepare for volatility in either direction. But I would urge caution, but I would also look at the probabilities there with a little bit more of a footing, and some of those contracts possibly coming into the balance sheet, along with the Bitcoin stuff kind of working in their favor there, really working in their favor. Maybe they come out with some really nice earnings, which could push the stock. So let's say they come out with earnings, they beat them by expectations, let's say 20% or something like that. Getting up into this $3 range here could be feasible in that $650 million to $700 market cap. So a $3 range. It's possible. If it was going to happen, now would be the time. If it's not going to happen, we just got to watch the earnings and see how it plays out, because there's also that downside down to $1, which is not too fancy there. So I would say this is one we'll be watching closely. And how many of you guys are trading KULR? Comment below your thoughts. If I earned your thumbs up, hit the like button. If you guys want to join us in our daily live sessions, we invest in space companies like KULR, in AI, in quantum computing is one that I believe is fueling some of the AI in the future. And then there's data centers and some of energy. But if you want to invest in those companies, learn how to invest in them, and join our daily live sessions at Market Open, it's the second link in the description. And we got a huge sale there. Would love for you guys to join us and be there at our Market Live session tomorrow. Would love to see you there. Thanks so much for watching. Appreciate you all. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.